everyone, and welcome to this recent new come on back after summertime in-depth genealogist chit chat. And I am your host, Valerie Eichler Lair, and tonight joining me is Sherry Hudson Passy. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be back. It seems like we've been gone forever.
Yes. Good to be here.
And Sherry is a writer for the In-Depth Genealogist digital magazine, Going In-Depth. And then next we have Melissa Barker. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Valerie. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again. And Melissa is the Houston County, Tennessee archivist. So she gets the fun part of talking about archives, and there was a ton of them in this particular episode we're going to talk about tonight. And then we have the in-depth genealogist, publisher, editor, do everything there is to do on the Going In-Depth magazine, Jennifer Alford. Hi, Jen.
Val. Hi, Val. It's so nice to be here and see everyone.
Good, and it's good to have you. It's good to have you. We are now going to be discussing or chit-chatting about finding your roots. That started this past Tuesday, and the first group of celebrities on the show. First of all, it's by Louis Gates and his team of researchers, and C.C. Moore, who is the genetic genealogist. This first episode was with Larry David and Bernie Sanders. And Larry David is the comedian, and if you all remember, he imitates or impersonates Bernie Sanders. So I just thought that was great. That's why I thought, oh, that's why they have them both on at the same time. Little did we know there was a surprise. So
yes.
And this first episode touched all of us because it had Jewish ethnicity. And Jennifer, I'd like for you to start off since you are our Jewish genealogist.
Sure. Well, I really enjoyed this episode, of course. My specialty is Jewish genealogy. It's what I study the most and try and unearth in my own family's history. So it was interesting to see, people that I associate with Jewish history, the Jewish stars, so to speak. And, of course, I love Bernie Sanders. I enjoyed Larry David's impersonation of Bernie Sanders. So it was really interesting to get to hear some of their stories of growing up. I really enjoyed hearing about their lives in New York. And I know it probably was surprising for other people that they really didn't know much at all about their family's history. Because unfortunately, many Jewish families, when they came over, they tried to distance themselves from the past. And so that's why it wasn't necessarily that the names were changed at Ellis Island, like, you hear the stories. Really, it was once they settled here, they tried to become more American. They tried to assimilate and not stand out as much as being Jewish. And, it's unfortunate because a lot of, people nowadays, they may not even know that their ancestors were Jewish. Right. So I really enjoyed Henry Louis Gates taking Larry David through his own family's history. And, it was obvious Larry David, he didn't know much at all about his family. Mm-hmm. And, it's really sad.
Nothing. he knew nothing. He said, I wish we'd had some family lore, but there was no family lore. He didn't even know his mother's name, her birth name. Didn't even know it. It was a surprise and a shock.
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, what? Her name was what? Who is that?
Regina. It was Regina. Yeah. His reactions to everything. He was so into it. It was so much fun to watch him.
Yes.
Get this information. He was wowed and shocked and interested and wanted to know more. It was fun watching him.
Definitely. And it was fun watching, as they had done the research and they had all the names of the 10 siblings?
I believe so.
And, he's seeing all the names probably for the very first time. And he's just like, oh, I'm related to all these people.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Well,
Okay,
and the sad thing, I was going to say, the sad thing too is the fact that his grandfather was the only one that came to America, and they were talking about how that one choice, that one decision, and he's here because of that one choice, that one decision, because the rest of them were killed, as far as they can tell from the research. So, you look back at all of our ancestry, and that's the way for all of us, depending on, what was going on. One choice, one decision put us where we are and made us who we are. So it's kind of amazing to think about that we're all here.
I thought it was really awesome that they found that it was his grandfather. Was it his grandfather or his great-grandfather? That founded the Jewish temple in 1844 that they had been going to, and that where they worshiped.
The one in Alabama? Was it Alabama?
I believe so, yeah, because they had
Alabama.
just shown a map of Alabama and several photographs, and then brought out
Yes, it was Mobile. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I found that part really interesting. As a Jewish person, we like to think, oh, we would never support the Confederacy. And, then he's surprised to learn, oh, yeah, they fought on the side of the Confederates, and, they owned slaves. And,
yeah. Oh, and I'm glad they didn't block it out or edit it out. But when Larry said, "I hope you didn't find any slaves," and I'm going, face plant,
Yes.
And of course,
and I was, go ahead. Sorry, Val.
I was just going to say, and of course, when he flipped the page, there it is, and it's like, oh, open mouth, insert foot.
Yes.
It was very interesting that the 2 slave women were listed as mulatto, and they didn't really go into that, but that's telling you something. I mean, he may be related to those 2 slaves because his slave-owning ancestor may have had something to do with the fact.
Right.
Or somebody along the line. So further DNA studies may show that he may be related in some way to them. So, but they just didn't have time to deal with that issue as well.
Well, you can only fit so much in a 52-minute show, and Melissa, you do a lot of Southern research. And so when you saw this from Alabama and the South, and then of course the Confederacy, what was your initial reaction, or what touched you the most?
To be honest with you, the first thing that came to my mind when they found his Jewish ancestors in Alabama, I thought of Driving Miss Daisy, because they were Jews from Georgia. And so I don't do Jewish research, but it would be interesting, and I'm sure someone out there, maybe Jennifer knows, maybe there were more Jews in the South than we realize, and maybe even more Jews that fought with the Confederacy than we realized. And maybe all that was part of getting the thing of, like Jennifer talked about, when they came to the United States and trying to distance themselves from, not, I know that's from World War II, but I'm talking about, Jews have always been persecuted. And so maybe that was a way of distancing themselves and making themselves become part of where they were, supporting the Confederacy, owning slaves and things like that.
I may have the number wrong, but I thought I remember them saying something about 3,000 Jewish men served in the Confederacy. I knew that they gave a number. And so it seems like that was about the number. I might be wrong, but I know they gave a number about how many
I think they did too, but I didn't write that in my 3.5 pages of notes.
What? Wait a minute, Val.
She just
forgot a statistic.
I know. I only got 3 pages of notes. Yeah. Well, because I admit I didn't watch the recording several times. So yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's like, I think Sherry called me a slacker earlier in the week.
Yep.
So, okay.
Only 3.5 pages.
Just you wait. But then, well, moving on, I did take the note because when they switched to Larry's father's side of the family, and I loved that picture with his father and the two boys, and they got the Declaration of Intent, and here he's German. And I'm going, yay! The German in me, comes out. Hesse Darmstadt. And I caught that right away on the document because I do know what document and where it came from if it's shown. And that was from the New York Common Pleas. So that was interesting. And so to see, the German side, and then of course showing the maps of Austria and Germany and different things. So in Alabama. So that was really cool. Well, then we come down to where they gave him, he went from knowing barely anything or nothing at all to this beautiful, huge chart that's, back to his third great grandparents on both sides. And then they say what the DNA is. And Jennifer, what was your reaction when you heard the percentage? Oops, I think you're muted, darling.
Yes, I am. I said I was not surprised. I have a couple of my relatives that I've tested that have both of their parents are Jewish, and they came out like 95 to 98% Jewish, Ashkenazi. So yeah, I was like, yep, that's what I guessed. And one of the interesting things about a lot of Jewish ancestry in DNA testing is that because way back in the day, many generations ago, people tended to intermarry a lot in their villages. So you have something called endogamy. So a lot of the DNA, it keeps mixing and mixing, and it makes it so that actually you have a higher percentage because so far back you are traced to those Jewish ancestry. So I'm sure Laura Diamond could have told a lot better than I did, but
no, you did great.
But that's just what I've learned so far as I've delved more into my Jewish side. Because for me, I'm half Jewish, half Mutt, and so as I learn more about my Jewish side, and luckily I have some Jewish relatives who've agreed to let me manage their tests. I've gotten to learn more about how you look at the different tests and how they interact and how you network with your cousins and all of that. So, so I thought it was pretty cool to see how his test came out.
Mm-hmm. Well, keeping to our 30-minute time limit on our chats, because we could be here for a lot longer. Let's move on to Bernie Sanders. And like I said, I couldn't wait because I loved Larry David's impersonation in the comedy side. And then, with Bernie, the amount of photographs is what caught my eye. I mean, there were several photos. I lost count, and newspaper clippings, and taking him back to, again, pointed it out that where he was in New York was where Larry David's family was in New York, in Brooklyn. And it's like, oh my gosh, the way all of our families in one way or another, cross paths. And to me, that happens for a reason. But I'd like someone to just talk about, Bernie, and of course there was, German side, and I believe the Jewish side. But Melissa, start us off with some of the things that touched you in Bernie's section.
Well, like Larry David, who, of course, they did not pass down family lore or stories. It was pretty much the same in Bernie's side of the family. His family, it seemed so sad to me and he seemed pretty melancholy about it himself, about the fact that they were poor, and and he said even to this day he pinches pennies, and so I really got to thinking, because it was really a thread going through these stories of no family stories, no family lore. And I would venture to say that most of us at least have one story, even if it's just one our parents told of when they were young, if it's that close. And so it really made me thinking about, we really need to retell those stories to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, even if they don't want to hear it. Keep telling them, because one day they're going to repeat them, because they will stick in there. Even though they don't want to hear them, they'll stick in there. And that's the only way, and, unless we write them down or they're published or they're in some way etched in our history and not lost, that's the only way. And I remember, and I don't know if it was in one of the Finding Your Roots or Who Do You Think You Are series, but it was someplace I heard that it only takes like 2 generations for these stories to be lost. And that is not a lot of time. And
Not at all.
just think about the stories you have inside of you from your family, whether they're true or not, whether they, they all have a sense of truth to them. We need to pass them down or pass them across or do something, because it was so sad to listen to these 2 men who had such rich family histories that knew nothing.
Right.
Now, granted, their stories were sad and they were tragic, and I try to teach my students, yes, there's happy, there's sad, there's the ugly, there's the pretty, there's everything, but it's all our history.
Right.
And, the more that records are coming available and online and just available, period, and the more that DNA is used, the more that these secrets are not going to be hidden for very much longer. And so,
well, the stories help you understand your ancestors too, because he realized a lot about his father, didn't he? Once he realized the stories, the struggles, and the terror and the horrible things that he'd gone through, why he was the way he was, why he was okay with the job he had. It's like, I came from this and I have this now. Why would I want more? I am safe. I am, he'd lived through all that terror, and Bernie Sanders kind of had that aha moment about, this is why my dad was the way he was. And he's like, I wish I could talk to him about it now. So that would have been something that would have been nice for his dad to be able to discuss with him, but he just couldn't. He just couldn't. It was probably too emotional, it hurt too much, and he didn't want to burden his son with those stories.
And we do the same thing today with our children, I'm sure, or our other family members, our own lives. I'm constantly trying to tell my students, you need to write your story. Even though it's not finished, you need to write your story, because I look at them and I say, do you want your children or your grandchildren to write it when you're gone? Because
that's a good point.
Go ahead, Val.
Well, that's like with my son, when he first looked at my scrapbooks. And so he goes, there's a lot of Christmas pictures and Easter pictures, and you all are eating. I said, because Grandma's mom loved to cook, and her sisters loved to cook. In fact, if you went over there and you just got done eating one meal, they cleared it off and they were getting started for the next meal. Eat this, eat this. It's like, and so I had to pass that. And it's, and along with the stories is you can take the facts, the documents, the research that you're doing, and intertwine those facts in there too, to make it, like I said, I'm a fact finder and so forth. So, but I could tell him that because I had photographs to tell that part of it, that side of it. And now with, finding, my mom's birth family and being able to tell that. And granted, I haven't written down so many things, but I've written down a lot of what I've already found. It's just putting in narrative format. So you got to tell your kids, and if you don't have kids, because there are some people out there, well, I'm doing the research, but I don't have children to pass this down to. I have a student right now in that case. Well, nieces and nephews, cousins, your cousins' children. So, but yeah, Bernie's was just, heart-wrenching, and but they had the family movie. I wrote that down. It's like a cool family movie, and how many people, may not have those. They can turn that into a narrative still.
Well, they also had that the photo of the family left behind, and he obviously had seen that photo before because he knew it was his grandmother. He knew that was her second husband. He knew the one uncle's name, but he didn't know the story. He knew who they were, but he didn't know the story about how he had been shot and killed, and so for standing up for the Jewish people and not wanting to turn them over, the resistors over. And so he was taken out and shot and killed, and he didn't know that story. All he knew was he had a withered arm, and he was the youngest, so he was the favorite of the family. So that was the only part of that story he knew.
Mm-hmm. And having the photo of his grandma, but didn't know who that other person was. And it was through the research that they did find out it was her second husband. And the other person was a half brother in that photograph.
Right.
And where that family research took them to find this letter by, I guess I put down Ghetto Council. I'm not sure if it was some kind of council, but this half brother was the treasurer, and it's like, oh my gosh, let me throw all the stories and stuff away and all the family lore so I can get something like that. So yeah.
That was amazing that they were able to find that and discover his story. Because you never know what happened when they were in the ghetto. Even though he probably was looked down upon for being on that council by the other Jews, he probably did more good than harm. And it's unfortunate that he had to give up his life.
It was called the Udenrod, is what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the liaison. They were the liaison between the soldiers and the Jewish community, and it said that they even had to enforce the laws. So they had to come be the enforcers. But when it came down to it, when they asked him to, turn over anybody who was resisting, and he wouldn't do it, and took him out and shot him, he said, "Oh, he's just a Jew, and he's a cripple. Don't feel bad about it." It's awful. But to be able to find that written down, where you actually have an account of something that happened to somebody, is a real treasure. It's a horrible, horrible thing, but to have it written down, it just makes it so much more real as you look at his picture, and other than just saying this is what happened, to have it, written down, and what they were saying about him was just awful, just awful.
Well, and they mentioned it briefly during, I can't remember if it was Bernie Sanders' story or not, but they mentioned the testimonials of the people that had passed in the Holocaust that are available through Yad Vashem.
Yes.
And if you ever go to yadvashem.org, it is really amazing. Like, all these people who survived and went on to they basically did like a one-page testimonial of these are the people I knew that perished in the Holocaust. And they would sometimes include photographs, they would include stories of that person, descriptions, who their family members were. And because there were testimonials from those who survived, it's possible that if you find one of your relatives in there, that you may also find, the person who gave the testimony is related to you. And perhaps they're still alive, or they have a descendant who's still alive that you could connect with. So, that's one of the things that, my family mostly left Europe before around 1900. So it was before World War II. So there probably were tons of family that I don't know about yet because I haven't made it that far back in my family's history. So I probably have cousins that died in the Holocaust that I don't know about yet. So I hope that someday I can connect with some of those people that did survive and are descendants as well. But we'll see. Who knows?
That document that they were showing from the who was it, the brother or that you were just talking about, Sherry? To me, it looked like a document that would have come out of some government records,
right?
And not typical genealogical records. And so, and I'm always looking for resources that are not your typical genealogy records. And it was so funny because when they were showing Larry David a simple census record, his excitement over that they found this, and I'm thinking to myself, which was really good for me because when when you do this for so long, you tend to forget the simple things.
Yes.
And so I was so excited to see his enthusiasm. And it reminded me that there are still people out there that are maybe not been doing genealogy for a long time, or they're new or whatever. And you know what? Teaching them about simple census records,
Yes.
you know, it's something that we still need to do, because just like Larry David, he could not believe they found this record, and I'm thinking it's free on the internet anywhere. You know, but he was just so floored by it. But I loved his enthusiasm.
He was so cute. He said, "How do you do this? How do you find these things?"
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cute.
Well, I
Thinking to
love the
myself,
census. I love
and I-
them. I get so
and I thought-
excited.
I thought to myself when he said that, you know, how do you do this? And I'm thinking, well, if you're going to get excited about a census record, let me show you what I can
Yes.
find.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that because on the one they did identify it, and so my homework assignment for extra credit, and you know, I don't do the grading or anything, but is identify what the other census was, what year. Because that's the one that showed his great grandma being born in Mobile, Alabama, and of course I could figure it out, or I knew what it was because of the columns. What are each of the columns in each of the census years? So you know, it goes down further, and I don't see that they did census. They didn't, at least they didn't show. They might have done the census work for Bernie Sanders, but I don't have that particular record written down on my notes that they showed.
I don't remember seeing this for him.
I just have newspaper clippings, the books, and the passenger lists. And of course, I love the passenger lists. It was from 1921, and my dad came over in 1925.
Yeah, and they had
So
the picture of it. Yeah, yeah.
the columns and what it showed, and that they had the certificate of naturalization. Now that's something that went to the ancestor, the person, when they showed that certificate of naturalization. And I didn't get the date because I was busy writing down and wanted to watch too. But
I think it was in 26.
26.
It came over in 21, and I think it was in 26, 25 or 26.
Okay.
Here is, remember me telling you about my son-in-laws? This is the certificate of naturalization.
Cool.
Oh my gosh! And see, that's what goes to the person, because
it's got her picture. See the picture?
Yeah.
This is a copy. It's not very good.
Yeah.
Neat.
That's great.
Ooh,
yeah.
Be careful of copying it. In one of my very first classes, a student went down. He was all excited because we just had the naturalization class, and so he learned all the steps of, you know, becoming a naturalized citizen. And he had that, and he copied. He goes, "I'm looking for the petition." And so when they saw that he copied that, they were ready to put the handcuffs on him, because that's again federal law not to copy it. And I was like, oops. So we'll pretend we didn't see that. But that's what went to the person. What I was,
And nobody saw that.
oh, nobody saw that.
No, sorry.
No, that was passed on down through the generations.
It was passed, yes.
Yep. And and that's how you had to get them. Because what's in the record books is just a stub with the certificate number, the person's name, and the date, and the name of the court. So
yeah, I have both of my grandfather's naturalization certificates
that were passed down.
In my hallway, that were passed down. They were my grandmother's. My mom had them, and then she passed them on to me. So,
oh, hashtag jealous.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my dad's, but it's interesting how in different families, what different things did get passed down. And but to go again with Bernie, not knowing very much, it seemed like he knew more than, you know, Larry David did on his family. But then again, to be presented with this huge family chart back to his 5th great grandparents, it's like, wow. And then the reaction when they were both individually, not together, but individually told to turn to the last page of the family book. And by the way, all the research that's done, the things that you didn't see on the show because they simply don't have time, but all of the research, everything that goes into those books are given to the person. But then they both individually turn that page and who their DNA matched through the genomes, and they're matched each other.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
And
That
the
was
reaction. I mean, I
Yeah.
get goosebumps. The reaction is like, he goes, oh no.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
So funny. It was funny. That was really funny.
And
Bernie Sanders says, Larry does a better Bernie than I do, so it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he does. He does. But they found this out in July, I was reading, and it's like, oh my gosh, they kept this so quiet and so under wraps for all this time. But yes, and we'll have to have some information on our upcoming chit chats about genomes and DNA and the ethnicity and how you can come to that match and what that means. And I'm going to be working to get Cece Moore, who's the expert, the genetic genealogist on the show. You saw her in a small clip during the episode. We'll try and get her on our chit chats sometime during the season. So, but the nasty timer has gone off.
I guess we have to wrap things up.
So I'm not the slave driver. That's right. So I want to thank each of you for being with me and having a wonderful chat about Finding Your Roots episode 1. And we look forward to seeing all of you watch our episodes of Finding Your Roots. If you'd like to make a comment below, please do so. If you have any other comments or questions that you would like to send to us, feel free to send us a short email, info@theinDepthGenealogist.com. And we'd like you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. And until next time, we encourage you to go in depth with all of your ancestors. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.